Greetings from Middleburn, West Virginia here in Tyler County. We'll all here will see places such as Middleburn and Sistersville. We'll also speak with Becki Ferrebee, who is a member of the Tyler County Historical Society and Museum, and she'll give us a detailed account of some of Tyler County's history and culture.
The Tyler County Museum has prided itself on gathering artifacts that tell the history of Tyler County and of West Virginia. It is a museum that's filled to the brim, 17 rooms full of information, and it has an artifact or some piece that tells the history of all aspects of life in Tyler County.
Charles Wells founded Sistersville somewhere in the early 1800s, about 1802, and built a log house at a place called Wells Landing just south of Sistersville. It really didn't take off. People really weren't interested. It was more like just a trading stop along the Ohio River until oil was found. A couple people had come to Tyler County and visited the Wellses, and they became interested because they were certain that there was oil lying beneath the land. So they bought some land and did some secret drilling. But the first well, the Polecat, drilled on the Russell farm, produced over 500 barrels of oil a day. And in time, 46 wells were drilled on that same farm, all producing wells, which led to about 2,500 wells being drilled all over Tyler County. The most famous being the Big Moses well, which was the largest producing gas well in history, and it produced 100 million cubic feet of gas every 24 hours. Now that is a massive amount of gas to be produced. But the oil and gas industry probably affected the town of Sistersville the most. And because it was a Ohio River town, easy transportation in and out of Sistersville, the Sistersville went from having maybe 1,000 residents to about 12,000 residents, all because of the oil and gas industry. And so it created all kinds of good things, like several banks, many, many businesses. There were at least 3 theaters in Sistersville at one time. One, the Sistersville Opera House, and in the museum we have chairs that are from the Opera House. There were many doctors. Somebody had to treat the people. There were also some other businesses because people like to gamble, they like to drink, and that brought other forms of entertainment to town. Houseboats lined up and down the river till it was said that you could walk into Sistersville, never leaving the river, walking from houseboat to houseboat along the edge of town before you ever had to come ashore. Sadly, when the oil and gas industry left town, then slowly and over time, Sistersville's residents started to leave, the businesses started to close, and really kind of the final straw that broke the camel's back was when school consolidation hit in 1993, and the high school closed, and a lot of businesses then left town as a result of that. Middleburn was established in 1798 when Robert Garl first visited here. He really didn't build his homestead, a log cabin, until 1812, and the town was incorporated in 1871 when it became established as the county seat, because it was the middle ground for the county. Then it became more of a booming town. Wasn't affected as much by the oil and gas industry as Sistersville was, and it didn't have the benefit of the water transportation that the Ohio River provided Sistersville. What it did get, though, was the first county school system in the state of West Virginia, and one of the earlier county school systems east of the Mississippi River. And that was the establishment of Tyler County High School, which opened its doors in 1908 and closed in 1993 through consolidation with Sistersville High School for the new Tyler Consolidated High School. the town, the center of the activities in the town really were around the school, as many communities center their activities around the school. But the way in which this was different was it was the first county high school system, so anyone in Tyler County could attend school here. Sistersville was an independent school system, and it was regulated by a different governing body, not by the county. So people would come into town, they would stay with people, they would live here and work here during the week, and then they might go home and visit their families on the weekends. Well, the town of Middleburn tried to capitalize on that a little bit and encourage the young people to stay in town, and they would plan activities for the weekend to try to encourage them to stay and make their home in Middleburn. And so that really caused the town to have a lot going on for it that probably kept the town alive and well.
There are many interesting places in Tyler County. Friendly, West Virginia is one of those. It's a small little community on the Ohio River, and it's a friendly little town. But what makes it so interesting, at least one story, is that it's one of the first places in West Virginia that had an all-women government. The women got fed up with the men of the town because they didn't think they were running things properly, so they decided to take over, and that they did. One of the relatives, Dot Griffin, wrote a book called The First Petticoat Government, and how the women took over and ran the town because the men couldn't. The Tyler County Museum is housed in the former Tyler County High School, which opened in 1908 and closed its doors in 1993 as a result of consolidation. Now you might look at it and think it's just another high school, but what's interesting about this high school is it's the first county high school system in the state of West Virginia. It was experimental in nature, and there were only 7 states who had county high school systems at the time that this school opened. It wasn't until 1933 that a law was passed that all states could have county high school systems. There was a school in Sistersville, but it was an independent school, and it was crowded because of the oil boom that had occurred there. So the need to build a school here was great, and the board was formed, and the high school was built with bricks that were cut here, stones that were cut here in Middleburn at the Brickyard. At the Tyler County Museum, we also have a one-room school that was airlifted and brought here that Governor Underwood attended, and it is set up just like a one-room school would be set up in the days of one-room schools. Tyler County also produced 2 governors for the state of West Virginia. One was the first governor of the state of West Virginia, Arthur I. Borman, who came here to study law with William Borman, and the other was Cecil Underwood, who attended Tyler County High School and graduated from here. Cecil's distinction was that he was the youngest governor ever elected as governor of West Virginia, and he was also the oldest governor in his second term of office.
This room is in the basement of the school. At one time it was the cafeteria, believe it or not, and it is the farm room. And it's full of old tools, old implements. There's a wagon, there's a boat, all kinds of things that made our lives a little easier, but acquiring the tools might have been a different and more difficult way. Most of us can't imagine that because we live in a modern world in which tools are manufactured in large numbers. We don't even have to think about the manufacturing process. But people in our history had to worry about a better way than using their hands and their feet all the time, so they would invent tools to make their work easier. The piece of machinery that you're viewing was a chicken plucker. Now, most people can't even imagine raising their own chickens and having to pluck the feathers off of them. When I was growing up, we raised our own chickens. My brothers and I decided to use them for target practice a couple times, so when my mother plucked the feathers off, she saw that they were filled with buckshot. But chicken was a very versatile animal. A lot of people used them in exchange for goods. They might take them to the store and trade them for some other item that they needed. Or a doctor might come and provide a service to the family, tend to someone sick, and he might leave with 2 or 3 chickens. The reason being, a chicken provided us with eggs. Chickens multiply pretty quickly, and it provided us with meat for a meal. That was pretty tasty meat if you like chicken. But it also could provide us with feathers that we might use in a bed or something to make a place to lie down a little softer. Now this piece of equipment that you're looking at would have been considered quite a modern convenience, and by looking at it I'm sure you can judge that it's not modern at all, and it is a potato grater. Now what they did was to grade the potatoes as good enough to sell, they had to be of a certain size. So you see the holes, the two small potatoes would fall down as that belt turned, it would jostle them down in, and then what you can't see on the side is like a large funnel that would funnel them down into a bucket. And those would be the potatoes that weren't good enough to be sold. People would still use them because this is a society that didn't waste anything at that time period. People were known to peel potatoes as little as the end of your thumb in order to have a meal, because potatoes was something that stuck with you, it was a good meal. But in order to sell them or to use them for trade, they would run them through this machine to make sure they were large enough for sale. The item that you're viewing now is one that I like to use to stump people because most people can't figure out what it is. I like to hide the signs. You probably can read the one that says dog-powered butter churn. But people like to harness whatever energy they could so that they didn't have to do the labor themselves. And my imagination tells me that they probably, in front of this churn, hung a bone or something that would cause the dog to want to run on the treadmill, and as he ran, it would stir the cream, and eventually butter would evolve. One room in the museum is dedicated to everything that might be in a bedroom or a sleeping area of a home. It's always amazing to me the things that we take for granted. Sleeping in a bed is probably one of them. Our modern technology, we have all different kinds of fabrics that we make beds out of in order to make them more comfortable for us. Early beds were simply ropes and pegs tied in a system to hold up some kind of a mattress, often like the feather tick, or in this instance, a straw tick that would support something that wouldn't support itself. People started out with straw. They were poor, probably because the straw is what they could grow on their farm very easily. If they were a little more wealthy, they might have chickens, and they would pluck the chickens, stuff this tick with chicken feathers. But if they had a higher standard of living, then they might have geese. And geese down was a lot softer and a lot more comfortable, and those people really lived a life of luxury. This is the loom room, the textile room, the weaving room. It's about textiles, which we take for granted. We go to the store and we buy what we want pretty much now, but not that long ago, people had to work hard. They had to use their hands. People had to use the cotton. They had to use the wool from the lambs. They had to card it. They had to spin it on a spinning wheel. Quilting was something that was a necessity in an earlier time. Again, it's something that we take for granted because most of us don't quilt today. Every scrap was saved because no scrap was too small to be reused in some fashion. The quilt that's being focused on now is called a crazy quilt or a patchwork quilt because it had a crazy design in it. You know, most quilts were designed to look like a log cabin, look like a basket of flowers. I mean, there's a multitude of quilt patterns out there. But this really was no pattern whatsoever, just crazy squares stitched together in any fashion, and they used a more decorative stitch on the outside of them to make it more appealing. The Singer sewing machine was important. Most people prior to that time had to use their own hands to sew. You could sew much quicker on a Singer. It was quite an invention. And the good thing about it was we still didn't have to worry about electricity. You powered the machine by using your feet on the foot pedal. The miniature foot stopped, the needle stopped, and so you had continuous control. Obviously it was a little bit more work because you had to pedal your feet. But women loved it because they no longer had to do the little fine stitches that you had to do by hand. Of course, some women were much better at that than others. And this was a consistent stitch. And it was speedier. I mean, we're always looking for things to ease our workload and to make things happen quicker. So the invention of the Singer sewing machine, the treadle machine, did exactly that. In today's world, we go to the faucet and we turn it on and we get running water. We have an indoor bathroom that has running water that takes the waste out of our homes, but it hasn't always been that way. We used rainwater, we had well water that we had to pump with a hand pump, and we had outhouses. But it wasn't always convenient to go to the outhouse. If you woke up in the middle of the night and there was snow on the ground, or if you had a fear of the dark, you might not want to travel to the outhouse. So we had what we called, delicately, chamber pots, where we could do our business and then dispose of it properly on the following day. Also, when we didn't have running water, we had to have a means to be able to wash ourselves and keep clean, so we often had a very ornate pitcher and bowl. The pitcher held the water, and we poured out what we wanted into the bowl, and we were able to wash our face and hands, wash our bodies, and then dispose of the water. Sadly, what often happened is people might turn to the first open window and toss out the water. You might be the unaware person that happened to be traveling by that window at the time. This room was the former home economics room at Tyler County High School, and so we use it now to be a kitchen room or a dining room. When you come here, you will see many different periods and different styles of furniture that you would have found in a kitchen or in a dining room, as well as all different kinds of dishes, from fancy dishes to what we use for everyday dishes. Now, depending on your status and your social status, you might only have one set of dishes. Some dishes were even made out of metals like pewter that we would eat off of. Then we learned how to make glass, and we have pottery. So from Payton City pottery, from Homer Laughlin pottery, to various dish makers in West Virginia, you can find examples of their dishes here in the museum. This item is a wood cook stove. We didn't have gas, we didn't have electric, so we had to have some way to cook our food. Prior to the cook stove being invented, we had just used an open flame or an open fire. So this was really considered a modern convenience when a woman got a cook stove. She really thought she had something, because there was a holder to hold the wood that was safe. There were several burners that you could do different pots at once, several different pots at one time. This one has an oven. It's a little more modern simply because it has a temperature gauge on the oven, although I'm not sure how you controlled the heat to bake a cake at 350 degrees when you're using sticks of wood to make the heat. The other thing that you might want to consider is we didn't have air conditioning, and we had a wood cook stove. So there was a heat source every single day of the year in order for us to have our food cooked. Now, some people did build summer kitchens that was a separate room off their house that they did the cooking in order to keep the heat out of the main part of the house. Many stoves were also equipped with a deep well that held water, and you always had hot water available. Might be hot water to make a cup of coffee, hot water to make some other kind of hot drink, or hot water to do the dishes. This is an ice box. It's really the forerunner of what we know as a refrigerator. Again, no electricity, no gas, no way to keep our food cold. A lot of people had spring houses that they created over top of running water to cool the items that needed to be kept cool. And then we got blocks of ice. Once we managed to freeze ice, got blocks of ice, we'd put it in this box, and then we could set items around it. So it really worked kind of like a portable cooler that you might carry on a picnic. The tongs that you see hanging there were to carry the big blocks of ice in and put them in the bottom section, and then it would keep the items cool. But this is a pint ice cream freezer. Now most people, if they want ice cream, they go to an ice cream place and they pump it out of some kind of a machine, put it in a cone, put it in a cup, or they scoop it out of a cardboard container, but it's pre-made. During the time period, even when I was young, we hand cranked our own ice cream, so you had to prepare the liquid made from cream or milk and maybe berries, sugar. We flavored it in whatever way we wanted to flavor it, maybe honey for sweetener, and you poured it in a metal container, and then you set it down in this wooden container that you see around the metal container, and you filled it full of ice chips and a little bit of salt, because the salt helps the ice melt, which causes the ice to get cooler. You know that if you want to buy a pop that's been down in water, you want to dig down in the cold water to get the really cold pop. And so as you hand cranked, the little metal container would spin inside the wooden container, and eventually it would all freeze into ice cream. Took many minutes, or sometimes all day if you used a large crank. I can't imagine anybody going to that kind of work for a pint of ice cream, and I'm an ice cream lover. But you then would cover it with some kind of covering and let it set a little longer in the ice so it would continue its freeze, and it was delicious. This area of the museum is what we call the parlor room. It has furnishings from several different parlors, but usually a parlor room in a house was the nicer room in the house, and we put our fanciest furniture that we had, and it was for entertaining guests or welcoming people. What you see spinning in the background is a fly chaser. Now, it's an unusual item, and it's the only one I've ever seen. It was used to set on the table. If the flies would land on the food, then the movement would chase them away, and then even the movement that extended out beyond the fly chaser would chase them away, and so your food would be saved from any critters that might want to try to land on it. This part of the museum is set up like an old country general store or mercantile, and it was really the center of activity in the community. A lot of people would gather there because they would hear maybe the latest news, what was going on in the community, or really what was going on in the world. They might come in to buy their groceries, they would buy their supplies. Everything was at that mercantile or that store. A man might be buying parts for a plow or nails or whatever he needed to build something. The women would come in and look at yard goods. Feed sacks were attractive, and so not only did they help us carry the feed home, but we might pick the particular pattern that we liked because we were going to have a dress made of it. Even as young as I am, I can remember going 50 years ago to the feed store and picking out a dress pattern from a feed sack that my mom was going to make into a dress at a later time. As time passed, then stores became specialized. They might only sell shoes, or they might only sell yard goods, or they might only sell farm supplies, or some specialty. And it seems that in the past like 10 or 15, maybe 20 years, we've gone back to we have all these superstores, these big department stores that sell all the things, so we have one-stop shopping. So maybe those people back in the olden times had the right idea to begin with. Modern medicine has certainly changed. Even at my age, I can remember doctors making house calls and coming to your house to treat you for a variety of illnesses. Years ago, doctors would come to your house, maybe in a horse and buggy or whatever means of transportation. Maybe they rode a horse. They would bring all their medicines with them because there wasn't a pharmacy. They often mixed their own medicines based on what knowledge they had and what they read in textbooks or learned in school. And we would pay them. Now we'd have to have cash or a credit card. We might pay them, earlier I mentioned a chicken, or we might give them a pie or invite them to a meal. They certainly weren't in the doctoring business because they were going to become rich from it. It was because they cared about curing people from illnesses. As I sit in this room, I always had a fear of going to the doctor anyway, and I look around and I see many of the different implements that are quite old. I'm not sure that I would feel real comfortable in going to a doctor and seeing some of the things I see here. The examination table doesn't look like it's the most sturdy place in the world to be. And I look at the x-ray machine that's in the room behind me, and I'm thinking, how'd they get an x-ray from that? So technology has changed tremendously, and we really take for granted the things that we have in modern medicine today. This room is the genealogy room. It's kind of the heart of the museum. If you don't know what genealogy is, it's when you're looking up your ancestry, who you might have been related to. In Tyler County, that's real important right now because we're experiencing an oil and gas boom. So people really want to be related because there might be some oil or gas money tied to it. So we do have people come in, take a look at the books that we have. We have a variety of census records. We have family histories that people have donated to us, that they've done the research and they want us to have that information. We have genealogy books from other counties.
because when you get in a county such as this, not too many steps, you cross into a county line when you're near a neighboring county, and you might need to research that county's information as well. We have cemetery records, we have obituaries, we have records from funeral homes, we have birth records, all different kinds of ways for you to find your genealogy. As with most communities in West Virginia and neighboring states, we have many small fairs and festivals that celebrate our heritage. We have the Oil and Gas Festival, which is a long-established festival that celebrates the oil and gas industry. There's the Marble Festival, which is a newer festival but celebrates the glass and marble industry in our part of West Virginia. There's the Harvest Festival, which we celebrate the harvest of the crops and the farmers here in this county. There's the Tyler County Fair, which was really started as a venue to display 4-H projects and 4-H animals, and it grew into the fair that it is today. The Tyler County Museum is housed in the former Tyler County High School, which opened in 1908 and closed its doors in 1993 as a result of consolidation. Once it closed its doors, my dad, Glenn Moore, thought that it should never be torn down and should be placed on the National Historic Record because of its historic appeal and value. And so my mom and dad formed the Tyler County Historical Society and purchased the building from the Tyler County Board of Education at the cost of $1. My dad believed that you knew where you were going if you knew from whence you came, and he thought that a look into the past was a look into the future.